a wall is removed during a renovation, revealing what could be another world. Is a priest in Ecuador in possession of metal plates that could hold the answer to if aliens visited us? A flying ace is breaking a world record, reaching the North Pole, but did he maybe go even further than that? Hi, hello and welcome to Digging Up Ancient Aliens. This is the podcast where we break down the famous TV show Ancient Aliens. Do the claims hold water to an archaeologist, or are there better explanations out there? I'm your host Fredrik, and this is episode 12, and we will break down episode 4 of season 2 called Underground Aliens. This episode was aired on November 18th, 2010, and I have to be a bit honest with you guys that this one is maybe one of the more far out episodes that we have watched so far. And to help us, we have a very special guest with us today, but before we dig down into this, remember that sources, resources, and further reading suggestions are attached to the show notes, and of course you find them on our website, diggingupancientaliens.com. There you will also find contact info to me, and if you notice any mistakes or have any suggestions, please reach out. And if you like the podcast, I would really appreciate if you left one of those fancy 5-star reviews that I heard so much about. Well, enough of me jammering. Let's venture down underground for the hunt for aliens. Hello and welcome to Bill Farley. Hi, welcome to the show.
Hi, thanks for having me.
And for any listener that might not be familiar with who you are, could you maybe present yourself a little bit?
I suspect most listeners wouldn't be familiar with who I am. Hi, my name is Bill Farley. I'm a professor of anthropology at Southern Connecticut State University, small little university in Connecticut in the United States. And I'm an archaeologist. I got my PhD in 2017, and my specialty in my sort of day job is I work on colonial American sites, settler colonial sites and Native American sites in New England, usually from the 17th and 18th century. But then I also have this little side gig where, for fun and for research too, where I run a YouTube channel called Game Archaeology. And I explore digital archaeology and archaeology as represented in different kinds of media, particularly in games, which is just something I've always been interested in. So that's where I sort of live on the internet most of the time, and where maybe you've seen me in the past. But
cool. Have you encountered any aliens in your video game archaeology so far?
No, not so much, although it certainly does come up. I mean, a great example of that is in the Assassin's Creed games. At least the early ones. I haven't played any of the really recent ones.
Yeah.
But at least the early ones, those games are, you go to these historic settings, but they're sort of based on top of, if you've ever played them, crazy conspiracy theories and ancient societies and underground groups that control power and have weird technologies. And a lot of that stuff is really adjacent to the sort of stuff that comes up on shows like Ancient Aliens. So there is some of this stuff in games for sure. That media is not immune to having this sort of conspiracy theory stuff thrown around.
And have you ever watched an episode of Ancient Aliens previously?
Not until 3 hours ago when I sat down and I finally got a chance to do my homework and watch the episode. I've known about the show for years. I've talked about it with people. I've been a little bit of an Ancient Aliens poser, I'd say, because I've certainly talked about it, and seen clips and criticized it and laughed about it. And of course, laughed about everybody's best friend, Tsoukalos there, or however you pronounce his name, with the hair. But I had never actually sat down and watched an episode And that is not true anymore. Now I've watched an episode and I took 3 pages of single space notes on it as I'm furiously typing as I watched it. So boy, it's interesting. It's an interesting experience.
How are you feeling? Have you, recovered a little bit, or are you just in shock and awe still?
I don't know. I think I said in our text chain back and forth, like I experienced some psychic damage, to use a D&D term, while watching it. And there's just it comes at you so fast, the stuff, right? And we're going to obviously break it down here, but all the claims, and they come so fast, and they're all over the place. And I know this is an early episode, I think, from the show, so maybe they've got a little higher production values now. But man, it's really structured strange, probably on purpose, right, to keep you unbalanced, right, I guess, right? So.
Yeah, and me and Blake had this idea that it's to get the drunk and high people still invested in the show, when it's quick cut, new things.
How much of this show is how much are they aiming for? You're supposed to just watch the show like really high. Yeah, I think that's a really interesting theory that they've written in such a way that it's entertaining when you're less than 100% attentive.
Yeah, and you keep the attention, so you watch the screen all the time, because otherwise you will be lost. But have you encountered these claims previously?
Not these.
Have somebody?
Oh, yeah, we go ahead. Yeah. I was going to say not these ones specifically. So this episode, I mean, they throw so much. They find so much stuff in here. Some of those, I guess, I had probably heard a little bit about. But in terms of my research, which is focused on, the archaeology of North America primarily, these ideas that indigenous people in any part of the world, but certainly in the Americas, couldn't possibly have done these things. They had to have had help. They had to have, and whether that help was aliens or secret Europeans or whoever, right? There's some kind of group that must have helped them do these things. And what archaeology shows us again and again and again, with very strong evidence, is that's not true. Indigenous people just did this stuff on their own. Indigenous people all over the world were incredible. Ancient people were incredible. They did these amazing things, and we should give them credit for them. So I would say, even though these specific claims, these specific examples that they were using are not ones I've really engaged with in the past, they all sounded very familiar to similar kinds of things you hear about any other part of the world. So that's not surprising. Yeah.
But I think you're teaching, right? Have you had any students in your class bring this up? Or
yeah, I mean, for sure. So definitely I've had students in archaeology classes who, their first engagement with the science of archaeology was through shows like Ancient Aliens, or these kinds of books that the authors are often discussed in these, the Ancient Astronaut folks. That was some of the first, because that stuff's so ubiquitous, it's everywhere, right? So they come in and they go, I heard about this theory, and from my experience, universally, every student I've ever had who had witnessed this stuff before, and maybe even sort of bought into that stuff, was also, they tended to be people who are really interested in science and really interested in how do we actually interrogate these things for real. And they were very open to hearing criticism of those ideas and new ideas. And once they had a little bit of knowledge about how archaeology really works, it was very easy for them to start to see the holes in some of these arguments, for lack of a better term. So it's not often, I wouldn't say a lot, but I've definitely had a few students over the years who this was their first engagement with the science of archaeology, was shows like Ancient Aliens and other things like that. And they brought that perspective with them. And I've always found that they were generally really open-minded people who were interested in they just wanted to hear the evidence and make the decisions for themselves. So.
Yeah, sweet. But how about we kick this off so you can start mentally repairing yourself afterwards? So something I reacted to is that they had this really long lead-in, that they usually have these, things to catch your attention before the intro. And this was unusual long, to be honest, but then the bombastic intro music cut in, and we start this episode on Derinkuyu in Turkey. Is you familiar with this site previously?
This is a site I had heard about just as a kind of, it's an important archaeological site it's in the textbook, right? That kind of thing. But I was not super familiar with it. So it was very interesting, but I could really quickly recognize, I think they are representing this site in a strange way, in a way,
Yeah, they represent it. I'm shocked that they bring up that this volcanic rock to start with, because most people know the volcanic rock is quite easy to work with. It's very fragile and you can shape it quite easily, just breaking things off. So that was for me a bit weird, because I usually want to portray it as, oh, it's so hard to dig through this. It's granite, is the strong rocks. They need the power tool. So that they just admitted that it's volcanic rock, it's strange. But something that they leave out is that there are, well, up to 40 other locations like this in the area, not 13 stories deep, but that there are other sites in the same area, basically doing the same thing, such as Kaymakli, I think. I'm sorry to any Turkish listener. And Özkonak, both underground region. And they have this engineer that I felt was maybe a bit uneducated, John Brandenburg. He is new for the show, but he is complained that this is a massive undertaking, even in modern time, which I felt was a bit weird.
Yeah.
And of course, take the reference to the pyramids.
Yeah, I had a note about that, the Brandenburg, the engineer, too. I think this is a technique they use a lot on this show, from clips I've seen and other types of media like this. They bring in a person who's an expert in something, in this case, an engineer, and then they ask them to speak about something that is definitely not within their expertise. So they have this guy who comes in, he's an engineer, and maybe he's got some interesting things to say about how difficult it would be to build a place like this, which I'm sure is true, and all the engineering prowess that must have gone into the production of this site, again, by ancient peoples who were incredible and they did stuff like this all over the world. And then they say, okay, well, tell us, how this compares to other ancient places. And he starts talking about the pyramids and how, it's actually more incredible than the pyramids. What does this guy know about the pyramids? What does this guy know about ancient cultures? He doesn't know anything. He's not an archaeologist, not an anthropologist, not a historian. He's not an art historian. He's an engineer. And so I think they use that technique a lot because it lends credibility, because he has credibility in something. But that doesn't mean I wouldn't go on a show and start talking about engineering. I don't know the first thing about engineering. So I thought that was really interesting too. And then on your point about the soft rock, yeah, that makes sense. All they need to show that, the aliens came up and but they want to portray in this case that these were built by people too. I know we're going to get to this. The claim about why they built these things is wild. is really an interesting one. And so they needed this one to be, this one could be created by ancient peoples, because they actually were creating it as a reaction to, with some knowledge from aliens, maybe. So in this case, the soft rock, served their purposes. So they let that one fly.
It did serve them a purpose, and something I felt that they left out a lot was other sites that was similar. For example, Hypogeum of Halsafeneni on Malta, for example. I think that was created around 3000 BCE, something like that. And but as you said, they are building up. Something they also forget to mention is the whole area from different time periods. So everything before, was it 600 BCE until the Byzantine era, basically. And we have Childress. He is a fixture in Ancient Alien circuits, David Childress. And he thinks it's weird that they want to live in caverns because it's scary. He usually have arguments like that. It's scary, or this is difficult, kind of simple ones.
Which is strange, because people have lived in cave sites for tens of thousands of years. Like, that's not an unusual human
and we
voice at all.
Still do. For example, I was traveling around Europe last year, and I got to Andalusia, and in whole of Andalusia in Spain, there's people still lives in caves today. So I stayed in a place called Galera, and they build their homes in the mountainside. So, they make their little cave and they plaster it and they live in there because it's cool. It's, don't need any AC or anything. You have very nice degrees, and it's 40 degrees Celsius, on a low day down there. So,
that's
it has
important, to stay cool there, right? I think, I don't know, some of the oldest sites in this archaeological sites in the world are in caves, and like you said, they kind of ignore, they pretend like every one of these sites they talk about is unique and special and perfectly the only one in the world, and that's almost never the case. They don't. They often are. Archaeology is really complex. Culture is incredibly complex. So every one of these sites is actually a part of probably a really complicated, complex cultural network of similar sites and sites that are related in one way or another. And the way that archaeologists determine those relationships between those sites it's actually a lot of work, and it involves connections between material, culture. I know we're going to talk about dating in a second, and of the site and how they came up with this. They just tell us the site, oh, actually, we think the site is thousands of years or 1,000 years older than the archaeologists say. The mainstream archaeologists, the word mainstream does a lot of work on this show. The mainstream archaeologists tell us the site's this old, but we think it's this old, and that's because you can't radiocarbon date rock. And it's like, well, I mean, there's other artifacts in these sites, right? And that's how we make these connections. I don't know. So I think it's a strange one.
Yeah, I think that's Giorgio who says that since you can't radiocarbon rock, we have no way to really know how old it is. But as you say, there's material culture that we could use to date the site. Unfortunately, some of that material might get lost, but we can still find some sort of baseline from ceramics and other items that we could find in the cavern. And they usually do that, say, oh, you can't do this, therefore my idea must be true. Except that Giorgio doesn't really tell us why he gets that date. He just got it somewhere, and trust him.
Trust
on that part.
The good old-fashioned trust. I find this with pseudo-archaeology very broadly, radiocarbon dating, I think because it's a thing everybody knows exists, right? It's like universally recognizable. Everybody knows, oh, that's a thing. There's a lot of mistruths that get thrown around about radiocarbon dating. Radiocarbon dating is a very specific technique. It involves very specific conditions. It works on certain kinds of material. It only can provide you dates on materials of certain age ranges. So like a lot of times people are like, oh, the radiocarbon dates are bad on this 5 million year old thing. It's like, you can't use radiocarbon dating on sites that are 5 million years old. You just can't. It's not how it works. There are also many other dating techniques that archaeologists use. Some of them radiometric or, physiochemical, like radiocarbon dating. Some of them literally are used to date actual rocks, though not necessarily these rocks. Although volcanic rocks, if it's made of volcanic rock, you could use potassium argon dating on it, right? Maybe. Yeah. And so some of them really do date rocks, and other times we use the cultural continuity of artifact styles and architecture styles and artistic expression, and we can make connections between, okay, this site has the same kinds of artifacts in it as these 100 other sites in the region. Many of those we can date more reliably, right? So you can make connections that way, those kind of relative dating techniques. So radiocarbon dating gets sort of used and abused, I think, a lot in pseudo-archaeology because it's something everybody knows about. But they're doing that here too. I think they're kind of ignoring the fact that radiocarbon dating is not the only tool in the archaeologist toolkit for dating sites. Not even close. It's one of many that's sometimes not useful for a site and other times is.
And it's, of course, how you handle the thing you want to date. Contamination is not unheard of in that field. But let's move a bit further, because they start to talk about Zoroastrian and a bit of the legends, and they tie into the Great Flood. So yes, in the Zoroastrian belief, there is this notion that Ahura Mazda, which is one of their gods, told Yima to dig a cavern, basically, to protect himself from winter that Ahura Mazda would bring down to remove all the wicked people, just as in Bible, basically. But they're bringing up this because if you have seen Ancient Aliens before, you know what's coming. Of course, ancient gods are aliens.
Yeah, that's just
Why
an accepted fact on this show, huh? That's just like, that's baseline, right? You're just supposed to,
yeah.
If somebody uses the word God, that means alien. And it's like, that took me back as somebody who has not been like you watching this whole show up to this point. I was like, wait, are we just supposed to, they're not going to give us any, there's no argument for that? We just, so that was interesting.
No. But they usually bring it up sometimes, because if you have watched it previously, you know that flying chariots that must describe aliens, spaceships, but they don't have the vocabulary to describe a metallic spaceship landing. So they, of course, use a chariot because they know a chariot. So that's their whole logic behind.
And that's like so close to something real, right? The idea of cultural, when a culture experiences a novel idea, it gets integrated into that culture in ways that are unique, right? It gets entangled with that culture's own, the people in that culture's own experiences and understanding of the world. Sure, right? That's real. That's a real phenomenon. But you can't just like use that as an excuse to say, it's got to be aliens. That's the only explanation for this. And so kind of, again, it's sort of a misuse of a real idea in a way that does a lot of disservice to our understanding of ancient people and what they actually were like.
Of course, Ahura Mazda was battling people. That's why they needed to dig this cavern, of course, because why else would you need to build an underground cavern if not for protecting yourself from alien warfare? Yeah. I assume.
Oh my God! So this was now we're at it, right? The reason, if anybody's watching the show along with us here, right? The reason that they supposedly built these caves was because of an intergalactic war over control of Earth, and the spaceships were going to fly over and kill everybody. So they dug these holes to protect themselves, and then the vents that are would have been blah blah blah, wild stuff. I was mouth agape while listening to them. But there's no other reason. There's nothing else anybody would ever. You would never want to protect yourself from anything else other than an intergalactic alien war. So not warfare or raids or any kind of violence or even protecting yourself perhaps from natural disasters. No, the only reason to build a city with defenses is to protect you from the intergalactic alien war.
Yeah, the vents are real, which is quite an engineering feature that they sort of leave out.
It's very impressive engineering feature, yeah.
But they do bring up the whole raiders and, warfare, but the whole excuse there was, well, you don't need to build underground city to protect yourself from raiders, and on horseback you can find the vents and just cover them and, smother the whole city. So it's not a great defense, while a walled city would be better in their point of view. I don't know.
Most people did build walled cities. That's a very common way that people protected themselves in antiquity, and even into the much more recent past. So sure, but that's not the only way to sort of protect yourself. The vent thing was crazy because then they also openly admit that there are thousands of these vents, right? So you're going to tell me that some raiders are going to. I don't know. Didn't happen, I guess, or maybe it did. I guess we'll never know. But I don't think it was. But yeah, but that was. I think that's Zookless, right? Who kind of again comes on and he says, "Oh well, the vents are okay because aliens would be flying by in spaceships in tremendous speeds.
So they wouldn't be able
to see the vents."
But if you come on horseback, you will be able to find them.
So these aliens are super like unbelievable futuristic powers aliens, but they're going to get fooled by some vents. Like they don't have they don't have remote sensing technology. They can't see that there's all these chambers underneath the earth or something. I don't know.
No, they don't have a ground penetrating radar. That's their only weakness.
That's their only weakness is they didn't invent ground penetrating radar. Oh, shoot. That was, I don't know if that was the wildest claim, but it was the first truly wild claim in this episode. The suddenly we'd like had this really quite dramatically created CG of spaceships fighting each other around Earth. And I was like, whoa. And I think later on some of the claims get maybe even a little bit weirder, but that was the first truly like, here we go. Here's a weird one.
Yeah, usually they tend to, ease into it. There's no alien spaceships within the first minutes. They usually save that part for the last 20 minutes or so when you're warmed up and ready to go, so to say. But yeah, this time they start cold. Do they
usually do like a world tour like they do in this episode where they
like to jump around, so you have to, that's a little bit of the game to see where they're going to head next.
Mm-hmm.
They don't stick to a place that long. They cut it up, and then from Turkey we go to American Southwest, for example, like this time.
Yeah.
Which and sometimes they try to tie all of these together. So last episode we watched the underwater episode, and they jump between Bermuda and Japan and all over the place, but they trying to tie it to Atlantis all the time, for example. Here they're a bit more scattered. They're trying to just come up with this underground alien theory. But how about moving towards the American Southwest?
Yeah, this was the next.
Where maybe you are a bit familiar. Would you really group the Navajo, Zuni, Pueblo, Hopi, Apache people together as they do here?
No, not in the way that they would do it. I mean, I think that's really reductive, right? And this is a very common practice in pseudo-archaeologies of North America and of the Western Hemisphere, is to try and flatten cultural diversity, right? There are hundreds, if not thousands, of native nations throughout the last few thousand years, certainly thousands of native nations all over North America. Now, I'm not an indigenous person. I'm never gonna try and speak to native experiences directly, like they're perfectly happy to do in this show, frankly. But I think that's really reductive to sort of say, but these kinds of shows, they do this all the time, right? They're trying to find commonalities, right? Like the flood or Atlantis, right? These things that they can kind of grab from different cosmologies and different origin stories, different religious practices around the world. And I think that's what they're doing here. They're basically saying, I don't think they do a very good job of it here. I think that the Southwest, as well as when they get into the Americas, I think they do it's not a very convincing job of even trying to find connections between these different cultural traditions. So, I mean, the short answer is no. I think they're being really reductive here in flattening those cultures out and suggesting there's a lot of overlap between them. Sure, are those related cultures? They're from the same region. There's some cultural similarities between them, some linguistic similarities between them, for sure. They some shared history there within that region, but those are very distinct cultures with their own distinct belief systems and their own ways of being. So I think they've really flattened that here.
Yeah, I'm a bit impressed that they speak about something else than the Zuni and the Hopi tribes, because that's been their favorites so far. I can freely admit that I'm not an expert on the American continent in general, as a Swedish archaeologist who studied Vikings for most of the time. But is there any truth? Do you know anything about the creation stories of the...
I mean, I'm certainly not an expert on this region either. And I mean, I think what they're doing here is what they do with any other part of the world is they go into a creation story, a foundational text, a set of religious beliefs, and they're cherry picking out the little bits that they like, right?
Yeah.
That sort of support their ideas. Some mention of, a flood, some mention of a catastrophe, some mention of every origin story ever has catastrophes in it. It has, the nature of religious belief in many ways. And you can always go in and sort of cherry pick something out. I don't think it's any more complicated than that here. I think they're doing the same thing. Now in the Americas, this is like classic centuries old colonizer stuff, right? This is the kind of stuff that settler colonizers have been doing for a very long time, as a way of trying to claim other people's cultures and cultural stories as their own or as less important than their own, or for a variety of colonial reasons. And I think this is a pretty standard fare for that. It's got the weird, extravagance of, well, the end answer is it's aliens always, right? Because that's the nature of the show. But I find it really gross because even more gross than somebody just spouting this stuff on the internet. Because of course these shows are made to profit, right? These people are making, but they're raking in a lot of money making these shows, and some of these faces on these shows are celebrities because of spouting this stuff. So they're taking other people's religious beliefs, cherry picking them, twisting them, and then using them to profit. And that's like super gross, right? It's really, it's icky, to say the least.
Yeah.
I mean, that's being very mild. I'd use worse words, but I won't. So that's my take on it anyway.
They do have some token native people here on the show.
Yeah, I don't know who these guys are. I'm wondering that too. And the way that I don't know. I don't want to guess on the way they manipulate guests on these shows. But some of these shows, I know it was big news maybe 6 months ago about how there was this new Atlantis show, and they really did do that. They had all kinds of people on the show, scientists and non-scientists alike, and they really misled them about what they were going to be doing on the show, and they twisted their words and made them look like they said things that they didn't really say. So I never know, when they have people on, the ones, it's pretty obvious the ones that are 100% in, but sometimes it seems like on these shows, and there are a couple people in this episode, and the two native guys look like this, like they just ask them these very specific questions and they give these very short answers and then they cut away from them really fast. And so it makes me wonder, like, how much did these guys really know what they were getting into when they were talking to these dudes? I don't know. And that's a really common practice.
Yeah, it was worse so if you watch the first episode, the first season, you will notice that they have these NASA people, the scientists, the big names within the community, and skip to season 2 and none of them reappears.
Yeah, because now they all know what the show's about. Exactly.
I think they, to some extent, it did mislead or maybe cut, creatively to make sure that they still spoke in a sense that, well, they took a 50 minutes interview and cut it down to 2 or 3 phrases. And of course you can find people say, oh, I agree to that. And then you cut that and, we have scientists who say that, yeah, there's some sense to it or something.
Yeah.
But
who knows? I don't know how much they've done that here, but that's certainly a practice elsewhere, right? So it's not hard to believe that could have happened here.
But these Native Americans in this episode, I think they're genuine UFO believers that might have incorporated this into their belief. There's not unheard of in other places and among other people. So I don't want to take that from them. But as you say, I'm not sure on how much they were briefed on what it was about and, the whole sequence on what they are going to present it as, because this leading towards Dulce, I'm not sure if that's a thing really in Native American archaeology.
Which
the town of Dulce.
I'd never heard of this thing before. It doesn't mean it's not a thing, but that was new to me for sure. So yeah, because then they talked to those guys later when they talk about the like secret underground Area 51 torture base, right? And they don't think.
Yeah, they used the American or Native American mythology, the ant people, the snake people. I'm not really great on that. There seems to be some truths or some legends with ant people that I managed to find from the Hopi people, at least. But
yeah, there are different religious texts, and but this happens all over the world, right? There are people who are human-like, and this you can find this even on quite ancient wall paintings and things and around the world, right? Images of human animal hybrids, humans transforming into animals, and vice versa. And this is a kind of critique I have of the whole episode, and it really goes back right to the very beginning where they're interviewing the woman who talks about, she keeps using the super sciencey sounding phrase. What is it, like extraterrestrial biological organisms or whatever? And this is the thing they do a lot on these shows, where they just look at something, right? Let's look at like a picture, a drawing, or even an artifact. They do it like 10 times just in this episode.
Yeah.
And they go, oh yeah, that's an alien. I can tell because it looks like an alien to me. And even a modicum of archaeological theory puts that idea to rights, because you just can't do that, right? No. Artistic expressions, drawings, artifacts are made within a cultural milieu that is, and especially if it's from things that are quite ancient. Some of these things are thousands of years old. We don't know what that person was thinking or experiencing or wanting to depict, or how it fit into their religious beliefs or their their quotidian beliefs, their non-religious beliefs. We really don't know, and we try and reconstruct that through the archaeological record as best we can, or from asking descendant communities and talking to people who might have insight to that, or we can try and reconstruct those things. But to just look at a picture of a human-like figure that's got a weird shaped head and go, oh yeah, this is an alien that evolved underground during the Ice Age or whatever. That was a real claim in here. It's just, you just can't do that. You just can't do that. It's disrespectful. No. It's disrespectful to those people, to their religious practices, to their ancestors. And again, it's pretty gross. So.
Yeah, I really agree with that. But here we also have Bill Barnes. Are you familiar with him?
I don't think so. Because this was the first time I've seen him.
Because he's an anti-evolutionist, and he always have these extra crazy claims. And he didn't let us down here, really. So the reason why they're at Dulce is because the ancient alienists believe this is a place for a black ops site.
Yes.
Apparently. So I've been vaguely aware of the area, but it's basically your new Area 51, but it's darker, more violent, sexier. But they use this to, talk about how ancient people always, as they want to put it in the show, they use the ancient people. But the Native American, especially in the area, have seen weird lights, and it's because Dulce have this underground base put together by the American government together with the alien, the gray aliens, I think, because the gray aliens were fighting with the lizard aliens.
Yeah, the reptilians, right? This is like X-Files.
Yeah, the reptilians.
I mean, did people basically watch X-Files and just decide, yeah, that's real life? I mean, that's pretty much what happened here. I know it's a little bit circular, because I know X-Files was, those shows were tapping into, already existing, canon lore, let's call it what it is, of this sort of stuff. Yeah, the reptilians and the grays. And you can understand why people get drawn in by this stuff, right? It's exciting. It's very interesting. It's okay for it to be fiction, man. It's okay for it to just be the X-Files. But that was really interesting. I had never heard of this site before, this Black Ops vivisection, human torture, creepy place. I immediately thought of Area 51. I thought, well, that sounds sort of familiar. And then I was reading, your research and notes on it too, and going, oh, okay, it doesn't surprise me that this is something that's been bandied around. And a lot of the claims in these shows, you can often, we were talking about this before, right? But you can put a kind of fingernail and scratch just a little bit underneath is this whole network of conspiracy theory stuff that doesn't necessarily have anything to do with archaeology, doesn't necessarily have anything to do with aliens. And that's where you mentioned one of the episodes, the previous episodes was about Atlantis, right? Atlantis is a nexus point of so many different conspiracy theories. And you can put onto it whatever you want, including aliens. You just say, well, Atlantis was made by aliens and now it's an alien thing. Right. You can see how this connects to conspiracy theories about government, about the black ops, about the CIA. I don't know. You can almost smell that stuff right underneath. And they've put an alien veneer on top of it. And because it's underground, it fits into the theme of this episode, right? That seems to be literally
exactly.
That seems to be the one thing that holds this whole episode together. It's, this stuff all happens underground. So because this is
that's
underground,
important. That's the
because it's underground.
Of the episode.
This belongs to this episode, even though it doesn't really connect in any way to any of the other stuff they're talking about in this episode.
No, but that's why they also have the Native Americans, because they are tied to that area, and they are the ones that, or at least according to the episode, they claim that they've heard these screams from these mysterious vents that apparently you could just stumble upon in the area, but suddenly were gone when it started to spread. But it might be good to know that, well, it's 2 or 3 people who is behind the whole mythology about the Dulce and the underground bunker, prison, vivisection experiment thing. So it's a Phil Schneider and a Paul Benowitz. And then there's a third person who I couldn't really track down, and many don't even believe that that person is real. So I sort of left it out. So it was supposed to be a janitor at this area. Again, showing how we always someone have these massive underground bunkers, but then they let a janitor spill the beans on the whole operation.
They just hired, well, we need somebody to clean the toilets, so we're going to hire a guy who, and then at the end of the day, be like, all right, don't tell anybody. So that's a recurring theme in this episode too, is I think we're going to see when we move into the sort of the South American section, right, of the right, this idea of people who supposedly wrote a thing down in a book one time, and that's it. The rest of all the rest of the ideas are built like an upside down pyramids, like balancing precariously on a secret journal entry by some guy 50 years ago, and it makes it really hard. I mean, that's why they use all these weasel statements throughout the show, right? Everything is, could it be? Is it possible? Right? Because they don't want to let you interrogate how thin some of the evidence is for this stuff.
Yeah, and it can be good to know that both Schneider and Benowitz have changed their stories so many times that it doesn't really fit up, but parts of it have become sort of doctrine for the ancient aliens, sort of their religious text. But I don't like to really bring it up because it doesn't add that much, but it's still good to know that both these people have struggling with mental illness. Unfortunately, they haven't gotten treatment for it as they should have, but I know it's something worth knowing when you read about it. And
I mean, that's manipulative too, right? If you're sort of saying, okay, we've got this person with a mental illness who has said some stuff, and we're gonna prop them up and take their delusions and make them real. I mean, that's really exploitative too. So that's just, I don't know. There's so many different gross ways that these things come to be. So,
to be honest, can we really disprove that this is a 7-level base with room for more than 10,000 prisoners, both humans, reptiles, and greys? Not really, but the show haven't really prove that it exists either. So
so many of the things are like that,
until
right?
that,
It's kind of prove me. And that's what you find out when you engage with believers of this stuff, right? It's like, well, prove me wrong. It's like, well, you didn't prove that you're right. I don't know. Like, why is that my job to prove that you're wrong about this? And I don't know. I guess we go out there and ground truth it, but nobody's going to, who, you can't get near the place. I have no idea where this place is, if it's on federal property or if it's on reservation lands. I don't know. So why would, I don't know. Why would you? Because then people are just going to tell you you're liars anyway, even if you did it. Be like, oh, there's nothing out there. It's just a mesa.
Or they have some secret technology, or of course they let you look at that area because it's over there, and then you waste time and money to, trying to prove that something, or prove a negative, since they don't provide any evidence from the start, which is basically how they stay in business. They want to give you some vague description, but then again, somehow it's your job to prove them wrong instead of them proving their thesis right, as any other scientists have to do, which somewhat leads us to the next section, I think. Cuevas de Tallos, or the Metal Library. Are you familiar with any of this?
I had never heard of this before. And then as soon as I started watching it, I could sense very quickly. And then I saw from your notes that this is an old idea, this metal library thing. And it was very interesting how they introduced it. I think they did a kind of a clever job, actually, of introducing this, because I had never heard of this before. And so they introduced it very slowly. Oh, there's this Spanish missionary guy. I was thinking he was Spanish, right? And he found this, or somebody gave him, a local indigenous person gave him some objects, and some of them had this weird writing on it, and they were made of metal. And isn't that strange? And then there was this survey, and they found and they found this library, or no, it was like there's just this one guy, right, says that he found this metal library. But they presented that very cleverly. They didn't just go, now we're going to talk about the metallic library. They built it up little by little. It's very clever storytelling. I mean, it's all horse crap, right? But it's a very clever way of structuring it for somebody who I'd never heard of this before. I was like, okay, all right, well, let's see where this is going to go. But this was full of super gross stuff too, because you have the whole story of the Western Hemisphere stuff, at least, and maybe this is true of the Old World stuff too, but the Western Hemisphere stuff is just dripping with like colonialism narratives, right? You have the whole Spanish missionary talking to the head hunters, quote unquote. Lots of that sort of like primitive people language banded about in these parts, and collecting these objects. And then, 100 years later, this Daniken-inspired weirdo colonialist dude puts together this huge expedition to go find it, and they barge in, and they're busting the place up and pulling artifacts out of the walls. And then his daughter is like, all right, why don't you come film me in my house where I've got an entire black market's worth of looted artifacts on my walls, and I'll show you how some of them look like whatever I want them to look like. It was like an Indiana Jones movie, man. Like, it was all in there. This section, it was all in there, and all of it was gross. That's my theme word. Yeah, gross.
So, when they start this out and bring up the Shuar people and, mention the word headhunter, I felt that can't be good.
It was foreboding. It was foreboding.
Because, they love to use the word primitive describing ancient people in general, and they usually, bring up some picture of, Homo erectus to show Stone Age people. So I felt that this might be going for downward. But then we meet Van Daniken, who you might know in name at least.
Yeah, Van Daniken was a person who I was familiar with of all this stuff. That one I'd heard of. He's pretty famous.
I'm a bit amazed that they even bring this up, because the thing is, Van Daniken did sat down with a known skeptic in the 80s, I believe, for Playboy. Might not be the best magazine, but
hey, some people just read it for the articles.
Exactly. That's how we going to get this 80s magazine back. But yeah, so now I lost the name of him, but he was quite prominent in the skeptic movement. He had read up a lot before the interview, so he could put Van Daniken in his place, and he started to talk about the metal library and the Cueva de Teos. And in that interview, Van Daniken admits that he wasn't there, and that he usually have some, he takes some author liberties, so to say, that he, make it a bit more interesting in his writing, because
he
doesn't present fact in that sense. He's an author, so he needs, to make it interesting for the reader. So I'm quite impressed that they mentioned the name of the book, Gold of the Gods. He was starting to sell a lot less. And that was how he picked it up until that interview, where he debunked himself by mistake.
I think this really strikes to something that I noticed in this episode, and I suspect is a theme through the show. The people who make these shows think you're stupid. Right? They think you are not the kind of person who's going to do any research, who's not going to read anything. So they can throw out this book that they know the author has said was false. And they just assume, well, the watchers aren't going to go and check that out. They're not going to go read the book. Why would they do that? They treat you like you're stupid. And it's like offensive, right? It's sort of like, and I mean, that's not even getting into the way that they manipulate scientific evidence and they use bad science. And that's also treating the viewer like they're stupid. But I mean, this is just like such a cold example of that, of like, well, several examples in here are, things that have just been, the people who wrote them or said them have come out as saying, that wasn't true. I made it up. But they just assume, well, nobody's gonna do that research. Or they expect that you're willing to just say, oh, that's a secret conspiracy that Anakin said that. He only said that because he was pressured by whatever. You're dear viewer, you're smart. You're an intelligent person. You're beautiful and wonderful, and you shouldn't have to be told that you're stupid by ancient aliens. And
no,
so that was my takeaway on this, right?
Yeah, because they're leaving out this myth originates with a guy named Moritz, who they left out from the episode, because with him they need to admit towards the interview that Van Daniken claims he lied. Because he just read what this guy was doing and then just wrote it in his book and said, I was with this guy in the cavern, and that guy said, no, you wasn't there at all. That's why they left him out. But we meet Stanley Hall that you mentioned, who is an amateur explorer, who in 1975 led a whole expedition. Among them were actually Neil Armstrong, the astronaut, for real. And to quote Armstrong himself, it was the conclusion of our expedition group that the caves, were natural formations. That's it. Yeah. In the episode, they talk about how it was machine carved, and they name drop a Dr. Brian Kelly, who I couldn't find at all on the internet. I'm not sure where he was, but no mention of Brian Kelly, who was in the Amazon with expertise in geology. But it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. It just means that it probably didn't happen.
The Armstrong inclusion is an interesting one because it's another example of this, right? Very easy to fact check, but they wanted to have that credential adding of being, Neil Armstrong, that's he's famous. Everybody knows who Neil Armstrong is. He walked on the moon. He's an American hero. All of which is true, I guess, but it's like, 2 seconds of Googling and you find out he came home and said, it was nothing. It was just a cave.
Yeah, it was a waste of time. I think he even added later on, they were Stanley Hall somehow managed to get them and 100 real scientists to walk into the forest to look at a cave, who was a natural cave. No one in that expedition has come out to say otherwise. It's just Stanley Hall, who was very persuasive and managed to waste quite a lot of money on the whole ordeal. But anyway,
yeah.
Then, yeah, we.
This is the story that had the guy who just like made it up, probably, right, with Jaramillo, right? Is that his name?
Yeah, Petrino Jaramillo. Yeah, he's one of the originators. He claimed that he had, as a boy, I think it's a boy in this episode at least, as a boy he had gone dove into the water and managed to find this cave. But apparently there's different versions. So in other stories he have told papers he found it while he was a major in the military out on jungle patrol, and his wife has admitted to writing down different versions of these stories for a novel that Jaramillo was trying to write at one point. So again, one of those who realized that he can make a buck on saying something and going forward with it. Yeah.
The one part of this story I thought that was the heroic moment was they mentioned that they thought that when the missionary, his collections all disappeared after his death, and they suggested, well, maybe the Shuar people came and took them back. And I was like, yeah, I hope so. That would be that's a good image, right? They just like, they're like, oh, we're gonna go get our stuff back, and they took it back.
He just walked into town. Yeah. That's Eileen Hall, Stanley Hall's daughter, who claimed that. But
oh yeah, that's right. That's right. And she's the one that has the collection of black market antiquities, like her entire house, presumably. That's
but Father Crespi, he was quite a character, as I've come to understand it, and he has been fooling people with his collection for quite some time. Even James Randi visited him way before this even. And then already he also was one of those people who seemed to suffer from a mental illness, and he had a quite extensive collection of carvings that he probably made himself. Even see in the episode different metal plates he holds up, and if you look at them, you notice that they are quite recently carved and poorly so, and doesn't really fit the South American carving culture really stylistically if you gave it a glance. But yeah, Crespi, he has been known to fool people, and I like the James Randi connection to him also. But Eileen Hall, she still searching for this cave, and we even have coordinators according to them. But if you go to them, there's nothing there. As you said, I think it's Giorgio who brings up the statue, or is it Eileen even?
Yeah, she brings up the statue, but then Giorgio cuts in to give us our first, it's just like the Egyptians moment. Although not really, because they compared that site earlier to the pyramids. But just this random image of an elongated heads, and they start talking about elongated heads, and then totally drop that thread immediately. They're like, oh, elongated heads, crystal skulls, blah, and then they just move on, and it's just like the Egyptians. See, and then the narrator has to come in and try and do a little cleanup and says, was it just like the Egyptians, or did the Egyptians also speak to ancient aliens or whatever? And I had trouble following what was even happening in that section. So I thought this whole section was quite cleverly constructed, and then at the end it just kind of vomited on itself in this way. They introduced all these characters, like I said, most of whom I'd never heard of, and they introduced them in these it so subtly, and it's this mid 19th century, the mid 20th century, Crespi. They introduce him very carefully, and they don't tell you about any of this stuff about how he's been accused of just making the stuff himself, and then if you were able to look at it any more closely than the 5 frames they show it from zoomed out, you could see that it's clearly not real. They're not real artifacts. They're stuff he either made himself or whatever.
Yeah.
But they don't, I don't know. They quite cleverly construct it. And then at the end, I think I always feel like Giorgio at this point, this is getting a little metatextual, but this might've been when he was reaching his like apex of cultural clout, right? Where the second season, the show was successful. He had the haircut and he talks like the way he talks, and he just, he is this personality. And so there's several times in this episode where he feels very shoehorned in. He just pops in and says some random thing that has almost nothing to do with what they're talking about. And then the narrator has to like clean up his mess. And I feel like this was maybe the best example of that. He just pops in. And he's like, "Hey, look, here's a picture of an Egyptian skull of an Egyptian person, and don't you see the similarity?" And I'm like, "Not really. I don't even know what you're talking about." So that's my theory. It's my metatextual theory about why Giorgio has to pop in once in a while and spout some nonsense.
Yeah, I have my own theory. So if I've seen a bit more than you here, an elongated skull. That's, the one of Ancient Aliens' favorite things, because if you think about it, it looks like the gray aliens, with the elongated skull. So of course they wanted to imitate these god alien people. So what they're showing you is actually as Egyptian statue, as you're saying, but it's actually the daughter of Akhenaten, made in the style of the Amarna tradition. So in the show, Giorgio says that this is a typical Egyptian depiction, or that you find all over Egypt, which is not true. You find it over a very limited time in Egyptian history. But again, you have the Akhenaten, because if you've seen earlier episode, Akhenaten is of course an alien.
Oh, she literally is an alien.
Yeah.
Oh, okay. So she's not mimicking an alien. Oh, this is good lore that I needed to know to understand this. So that's right. So this is because I have not watched the whole show, and I'm just going to be honest. I'm not going to. I can't take that level of psychic damage. That's interesting. So this is actually building on a theme that's been going in the show. And
but they're leaving.
We're supposed to recognize her and go, "Oh yeah, she's an alien. I know her." Yeah, okay.
Not that. I think that wants, to tie that South America and Egypt must have contact somehow. And how would they have done that without any advanced flying machines type of thing, basically. And but they even have the H-shaped blocks. They have some animation where we go down into the library trying to tie it up. So we have this H-shaped block from Pumapunku in the background. Did you catch that little?
I did not. No. Nope.
So when they're cleaning it up and, they're showing you their the animation where you see this ancient stone library vault where the stones are, you can see in the background, you have the Pumapunku H block, just so you can, tie it to another site.
Mm-hmm. So they're trying to build a little network here. I think the narrator in this section does an interesting thing, which is almost quasi archaeological, where they raise two possible like equifinal interpretations, right? If we want to accept that there has to be a link between, let's say, the pyramids in Egypt and the Mayan pyramids or something. Oh, they have to be linked, even though we can very easily think if you want to make a really tall structure, it makes sense to start big at the bottom and get smaller as you go up. It's actually quite logical. It's not that hard to imagine that two different groups of people might have thought of that. But let's say we had to prove that there was a link between these two things. We get this kind of equifinality interpretation here where they say, well, it could be that the aliens, both of them equifinality and that they both are aliens. Well, the aliens might have given them technology so that they could actually like link, they could talk to each other and they could fly back and forth over the ocean. Or it's that the same aliens were talking to both of them separately and they learned it, right? And that's like almost like how real science works, right? Where you kind of come up with a couple of different competing hypotheses, and then you test them against each other. But it's so circular because they've already decided. Well, we already know aliens are the answer. We just want to know how did the aliens do it, right? That's really what they're trying to answer here. So this was a great example of that too. And I did not notice that little bit of lore, but that feeds into that. You can see how that feeds into this idea that we want to tell the reader, the viewer, they already know the answer here. It was aliens. Yeah. Aliens taught them how to do it. We're just trying to answer the question, how did the aliens do it? And that's a whole different level of acceptance, right? So,
yeah, they are not trying to, let you decide from the evidence. They have their plot point already. It was ancient aliens. Everything else would be silly. But let's move to, I have no idea how to really pronounce this. Tatspian?
Yeah, yeah. I'm certainly no expert in this either. But boy, we do another globe-trotting jump here.
A bit less this time. We only moved to the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico.
We're staying in the same hemisphere.
And yeah, almost the same. And we go to a excavation from 2007, and Guillermo de Anda, who I actually had heard about previously, just in passing, but I was familiar with the name. He's quite famous among cave exploring and diving archaeology, underwater archaeology, spelunking and things like that. And he did find in Tatspian in Mexico in 2007 underground cave, which he believes is a Mayan, has a connection to Xibalba in the Mayan tradition. Were you familiar with this find previously, or was this new to you too?
This was mostly new to me. I think similarly, this is the kind of thing I had sort of heard about because underwater archaeology is something I keep a half an eyeball on. I got a minor in underwater archaeology as an undergraduate. And so it just interests me. So it was one of those things that was like, oh yeah, okay. It was very interesting to see that get integrated here into the show. And it's another great case study in a way that they manipulate real archaeological data into saying something I don't think it really says, right? Which is I'm sure we'll get into here, but.
Yeah, I was impressed that they got the Anda to appear on the show even. Again, I think it's one of those who might not have realized before what he was dealing with, because when I read up on him later, he seems like your ordinary scientist.
Yeah, he doesn't come across as a believer, I don't think.
No, I don't think he is. I haven't found any proof about it, at least of more other than appearing here. But yeah, he found this cavern, and as I've understood, I'm no Mayan expert, but I read up by keeping an eye and spent some courses on it. But it's not, the Mayans did have Xibalba, the underground death place, and it's a quite important part within the Mayan tradition. And we have found other caves that archaeologists do believe are representation for Xibalba under, I think it's even under one of the pyramids. Now I lost which one. Yeah, anyway. So the idea that they're presenting here from the start isn't strange to anyone, really.
Yeah, I mean, that's not hard for me to buy. People do that all the time, right? They have an important cultural story or a part of their religion and then people depict that in material ways in the real world. We do that all the time. Humans do that all the time, right? That's not that hard to believe. So
No,
that's,
and
yeah. So I didn't find that. And I don't know the specifics of the site, and I have not, interrogated the evidence myself, but I don't find that doesn't seem like a totally out of nowhere interpretation to me.
no, and we have other examples, such as they bring up the Popol Vuh, and we have the sunken courtyards that's important in that story, and the ball game, of course, in Mayan tradition is also a very important part that comes from their religion, or at least are incorporated in their religion. But then they do a little twist, because they start to talk about torture chambers, and as I've understood, the caves are separated in different rooms, and again, we have other examples of it in the Mayan traditions. But one room they claim is a literal river of blood, which seems strange.
That was what I wrote in my notes here. A trench that might have once been filled with blood because it's a trench and trenches can hold liquids. That was the evidence that they gave for this. I have that written in all caps in my notes. What? So again, it was a very strange jump to me to go from, okay, this is a representative religious space in which parts of the religious story are being represented materially. Again, that's something that people do through many cultures all over the world throughout time. So not that hard for me to believe. And then but actually people were like carrying out horrible torture in these places to recreate. It's like, I don't think we really have any evidence for that whatsoever, that actually happened. Torture was a weird low-grade theme throughout this whole episode. Did you notice that?
Yeah, they...
But
weird. I think it's to capture the viewer, and in a sense, I think it's to show that the ancient people were a bit barbaric, primitive.
Yeah.
So, torture is something only barbarians and primitives does. So when I tried to research this, I found mentions of this river of blood, but only on ancient alien sites. The site, the ANDA, doesn't seem to have published anything great on it, at least that I can find, with my resources. Might be somewhere, but from how he talks on National Geographic and other things, the thesis he has is that the site is older than we want to date Mayan tradition to. If he would be true and the water table was lower, we would need to move the Maya time period back,
that happens all the time in archaeology, right? Yeah. That happens all the time. We find new sites, we find new evidence, and it changes the timeline. And then sometimes things are older than we thought they were, or not as old as we thought they were. Okay, the jump that the show always makes, and they make here, is, that proves that it was that aliens taught them this stuff, or that this was actually like alien gods living down here or something, and they were there to do sacrifices for them or something. And like that leap of logic is not necessary. I think it's a little bit of a gotcha, like, we got the archaeologists because they told us the site was this old, and actually it's a little bit older than that. And any archaeologist would tell you, okay, that's just new evidence. That happens all the time.
That's fine.
We're not indebted to some chronology that was determined 50 years ago and it can never change. The chronologies of sites and cultures changes all the time. And so that was, the River of Blood thing. Again, a great example of this, like in this show, of just like, we see a thing and we like the idea that that's what it was, and so that's what it is, right? I looked at the picture of a what I think is a weird looking depiction of a human, so it must be an alien. The elongated head, she must have been an alien, right? There's a trench in this cave, and that connects to a river of blood in a religious text. Therefore, this was literally filled with human blood in antiquity. Yeah. Which it's just, what, you have to be willing to accept these huge leaps in logic, and this is just another example of that, I think.
Yeah, an example of, again, getting a reasonable person to appear on the show and then edit cleverly around it, because it's not the Anda who comes with these strange claims. He talks quite reasonable things on how it found, and he mentioned some things like the temple that he found in there, the pyramid. That okay, yeah, that's cool and everything, but then they cut in around him, so taking his credentials to again put words in his mouth, even if he doesn't really speak about it, which is a bit unjust, I think.
It is, yeah, and he's rightly excited, right? He comes in there, and I think he says something about, "Oh, this site is older than any site of this type should be," or whatever, however he puts it. And they cut to that, and they go, "Oh, yeah, that's proof that actually, it's what we say it is." And it's like, of course he's excited about that. That's an exciting finding, right? That's a transformative finding, that a new site pushes back a timeline or changes a timeline or lets us know something new that we didn't know before. Of course he's going to be excited about that. That's an exciting finding with just as a scientist. We don't need to add all this bizarro stuff to it to make it exciting. The site, and again, I don't really know this site personally. I've never read anything about it personally that's not in these kind of pseudo-archaeology things. It just sounds like it's a cool archaeological site all on its own. It doesn't need this weird stuff.
Yeah. And then they bring up my favorite thing that they tend to do, mix and match freely. So they talk about the Shelambalam, Book of the Jaguar Priests, which is actually several books, but they don't mention that. But they are, the traditions and text from the Mayan people written in, I think it's after Spanish came to Mesoamerica. But here they mix and match a little bit, because they talk about the road to the stars descends, or the road to the stars descends from the sky, and that 13 and the 9 gods came to earth. I think that's Childress who brings that up, or Giorgio. Now I'm a bit hazy on that part, but from Maya point of view, that doesn't really make sense to me. And I try to find the passage. Can't find it in any translated Shilambalam book I could have access to. And I think they have cleverly mixed this up to give a bit credence to their own text, because if you look at the Aztec mythology instead, there you have 13 heavens and 9 underworlds, which my theory is that they have mixed up Aztec and Mayan, invent things that would fit into their perspective, because that's what they've done in the past, and they don't really give you any sources other than it is in this ancient text somewhere. You have to trust me.
Yeah, trust me, bro, could be the subtitle of this show. And it's yeah, they do. It's another example of them kind of telling us they think we're stupid, right? Like it's very much and it's also very the logic of it is very circular. It's like we've already determined what the answer is, and we just want to find the things that support our conclusion, and that is literally the opposite of what science is. It's completely backwards, right? It's completely turned science on its head. And that's, and these people tend to, present themselves as scientists. They want us to think they're scientists, and, they're not. They're like anti-scientists. They're doing the opposite of what science is. And I had a note to myself from, again, way back in the beginning. I was so thrown off by that use of that phrase. And the one woman I don't remember her name, but she comes on just a couple times, and every time she uses that phrase, or like a extraterrestrial organic being or something, or something, and I can't even remember the full word.
I think that's Linda Moulton Hove. She actually got an Emmy for her reporting.
Yeah, and she throws that word around, and that reminded me so much of pseudo-archaeology, where you create jargon, you talk to people who have credentials in something that's unrelated. It's all about a search for lending credence, lending weight to the things that you're saying without actually saying them, without actually making a real scientific claim, without actually presenting evidence. Because if you did that, it would be, hilariously easy to deconstruct. And that's, I think that's, again, sort of what's happening here. I think you're right. I think that's what they've done. They've gone and, oh, well, we've got these 2 or 3 different texts. They have nothing to do with each other, from totally different cultures, hundreds or even thousands of years apart. And we're just going to grab a little thing here and grab a little thing there. Yeah. And we mix it together, and now it's aliens, right? That's so offensive. Right, to the ancient people who actually did these things and actually wrote these texts, and actually, it's, I don't know. So I think I agree with you. I agree.
Yeah, and I think they do it because it's easier for them to sound credible, because just because I can't find it, it doesn't mean that it doesn't exist. So they still can, say, oh, you didn't look in the right place, or your translation is wrong, or you didn't look it up at all. But I won't give you any page number or book.
Well, you show me the thing then. Oh, no, you got to do it yourself, because that's how you find the truth, man. You got to find it yourself.
You need to do the research yourself.
I do research all the time on real things, okay? I don't have time for this.
And then we have a Mr. Wilcock, who have been quite prominent in at least season 2. And he has an interesting theory about the Maya sacrifice. So he didn't believe that ETs came here to say that they should sacrifice people. They left. So since the aliens were their gods and they went away, people were so distraught that they started to sacrifice humans for the aliens to come back, which again is robbing a culture of their heritage on a new level.
This part grossed me out a lot. First of all, this guy is slimy. The Wilcock guy, he really grossed me out maybe more than anybody else in the show. And this passage bothered me more than most of the others, because you can almost sense he was offended by the idea that the aliens would have encouraged human sacrifice. Yeah. He was like, "Oh no, the aliens wouldn't have done that." But the people, no, of course. As soon as they left, they started sacrificing each other because they were these backwards people who didn't know what they were doing. So it's like he lends to these fictional aliens a humanity that he refuses to lend to actual humans, to actual people, and the descendants of those actual people living today, right? And just as you said, he does that by robbing them instantly of their own heritage, of their own history. So, well, I'm sorry, I didn't even I got a little bit fired up on that one, but this passage bothered me about as much as anything in the show, for that reason. Part of it was the like slimy, like the aliens wouldn't have done that. Come on, dude. Like, you're going to defend the aliens, but you're not going to defend people, your fellow human beings. Come on.
No, but I think that's a great example on how they're trying to remove especially non-white people's culture and heritage, because they don't really talk about the Scandinavians in that sense, or the British, or really the French. It's more this darker skin people that they tend to focus in on, and robbing them from their heritage by claiming aliens. And in this case, saying the aliens had a peaceful message, but these primitive non-white people, they would sacrifice each other because they can't understand better.
And this is where I go, I was saying earlier, like this is like colonialism 101, right? This actually ties into a much deeper history than Ancient Aliens, I think, which is that people have been doing this, white colonial settlers have been doing this to indigenous people and non-white people for many hundreds of years, showing up and going, your ancestors couldn't have made this thing. So it should have been somebody else. Right. And so for a long time, that was the Lost Tribe of Israel. It was Celtic monks. It was Atlanteans. It was Phoenicians. It could be, pick your poison. But it was, this is an interesting kind of modern transformation of that, none of these ideas are new. They're actually quite old, right? And they just said, well, what if instead of the Atlanteans or the lost tribe of Israel, it was aliens? But it effectively does the same thing. And that was something I was curious your thought on that, because you've watched a lot of the show. And you've sort of just answered this question for me. Do they ever talk about, do they ever talk about sites that are white people sites? I mean, I don't know, like they don't seem to, right? So race and racism is just inherent to this stuff.
So what I've noted today, it's a lot less, but they do, but there's a but to that. They talk about it in a different sense. So for example, we have encountered Stonehenge previously, but it's not like the pyramids or the Mayan construction or Pumapunk or anything like that, because they don't question that the old ancient British people could have built it. They could have dragged the stones and put them out there, no problem. The reason they built it was to communicate with the aliens.
There's an agency there. It's a different level of agency, right? Like the Stonehenge builders, they knew about the aliens. They cottoned on, and they were building the pyramid. They were building the Stonehenge so that they could reach out to aliens. It's very active, right? It's very agentive. I don't want to over read into this, but it just, I don't know. The hands are sticky with it. It seems pretty obvious to me.
No, so yeah, that's why I think they're robbing predominantly the non-white people's history in a different sense, because they're the question actually that, well, they can't build this because they are primitive, they're ancient, while a white British person can drag stone without any issues. I'm not sure if they changed that later on, but from as far as I've seen, that's how they.
It'd be interesting to see if later seasons if that changes later in the season, because at some point I think the show started to get criticized for that. Probably, I'm sure it already was being criticized for that at this point. And I don't know, it'll be interesting. I keep finding myself thinking about the sort of metatextual questions of the showmakers and how they might have reacted to the growing popularity of the show and the growing criticisms of the show. And I know that that's always been a criticism of these shows, that the racial stuff is like just below the surface. You don't have to think.
Yeah, they have at least now in season 2 started to say Native Americans instead of Indians that they did in the first season.
So they're at least thinking, well, we should at least use terminology that's acceptable to people or something. And I guess that's something, but even that's...
So it will be interesting to see how it evolves. But how about we go on the craziest part of the whole thing?
Wait, I want to read. This is the note that I wrote for this was, I got to be honest, without even telling what this last section was about. This was my note. I got to be honest, this last section has lost me. This has jumped the shark in a show that is made of sharks. So I'll let you introduce it. But that was I took almost no notes on this section because I just watched it with my mouth agape. Like, what are we even talking about here?
Even for Ancient Aliens, this was pretty far out there, to be honest. So they're opening up on the North Pole, and they talk about the darkness for 6 months a year. And as a Swede, I'm pretty familiar with the darkness. And what they don't mention is that it's sun 24/7 the other half of the year.
People know that, right? It's not.
And then I dropped my jaw because it's not mainstream historians and mainstream archaeologists, it's mainstream geologists too.
Ooh, yeah, we got that word mainstream doing so much work.
But we're talking a bit about that there's an extra sun inside the earth. And they start to talk about Haley, and sure, Haley did in 1962, they say 1692, they say 1691 in the show. He wrote a thesis that, he believed that the Earth was hollow, and aurora borealis was due to particles that escaped from holes at the North Poles. And then they talk about Captain John Cleve Sims Jr., who also thought there were openings at the poles in 1818. What they don't mention is that nobody has been to the North Pole at these times. And if you look back at old academic discussions, even, academics in, 1818 standards still, but there was accepted that anything could happen on the North Pole or the South Pole because nobody was there and it was a mysterious place. Garden of Eden has been thought to be at the North Pole. Race of giants would be able to live up there, and the pole has been used as a backdrop for strange and mysteries and not really know how long. Even Mary Shelley in Frankenstein used the North Pole as a backdrop for, the mystery and, anything can live up there. And even though it's been many ill-fated attempts to escape it, explore it, none really did until quite recently, to be honest. We even have, unfortunately, a Swede who tried to explore it by balloon. It did not go well. He tried to, Andre tried to fly it with his balloon, the Eagle, a hydrogen balloon. To his credit, he tried to do it in the summer, but it didn't help, unfortunately. So the first explorer who did reach it was either Fredrik Cook in 1908 or the more accepted Robert Peary in 1909. So none of them really mention anything about a giant gaping hole to the netherworld, when they were there at least. But then they talk about Richard E. Byrd, who I didn't know anything about, but they talk that he went there February 1947. This part they are very specific on for some reason, we will come to the reason, but apparently he flew over the North Pole and he got stuck with a tractor beam and dragged down into the underworld and shown all these amazing things. And apparently the aliens didn't like that we used atomic bombs and things like that because they are very peaceful aliens. Sure, the Mayans thought that they went away, that's why they started to sacrifice people, but really they stayed underground. I'm not sure what they're trying to get out here. There's some maybe holes in their logic, but Byrd was a real character, and he was a flying ace and explorer and quite famous. And he did claim to have flown to the North Pole, but in 1997 we did find a journal previously unknown from the flight, and many people has long apparently suspected that he didn't fly to the North Pole. He flew close to it, but never all the way. And in his journal that we found, the coordinates in there seems to indicate that he actually didn't fly to the North Pole in record times that nobody since was able to reproduce. But what they're basing the whole thing about is that in 1990 they found a previously unknown journal of his where he talked about all these underground aliens. Unfortunately for Ancient Aliens, it's a giant hoax, basically. But yeah.
Yeah, this
I don't know.
This one was wild, as we sort of alluded to. Really, first of all, I didn't really see how it fit into the theme of the episode, other than underground. Therefore, it That's it. That was the one unifying theme of the episode. Most easily proven false stuff, right? Like this is just basic like science, geology. We know what the inside of the earth looks like a heck of a lot, you know. The 1692 theory was a theory, right? They even explained that he was trying to explain why the magnetic poles move, right? He didn't understand why that would be. If the center of the earth was solid, then they shouldn't move. And so he theorized that maybe there were like moving spheres inside the sphere. Okay. I mean, that doesn't turn out to be right, but I get the logic, I guess, of trying to answer a mysterious at the time scientific question. That was all sort of interesting, I guess. My one comment I had really about this section was, this section was pretty close to something I know a little bit about just because I think it's interesting, nothing to do with my own research or anything, which is all these theories were like 1 millimeter from flat eartherism. Like a lot of the same ideas about flat eartherism, about the nature of the earth and the creation of the earth. Flat earth is often actually linked to creationism and the firmament and the relationship of the planet to the sun. So it was very interesting to hear these theories, and almost no aliens in this at all, right? This whole section. The only place the aliens came in were way at the end with Bird's claim, right, that he had flown into the center of the earth and there were aliens down there, or that the original theory, the 1692 theory, suggested that maybe life could have lived on these internal, which is where the whole dinosaurs in Jules Verne's story comes from, right? I think that there were like, ancient species, extinct species that might still live on these internal elements. But, that stuff's all fiction, man. It's like, we don't have to try and find a reason that it's real. So that was just interesting to me. I recognized in this stuff, and this was throughout the whole episode, we've talked about this a lot, how there's close connections between these theories. The guys who make this show, including Giorgio and whoever, right, they want the aliens to be the like linchpin of all the conspiracy theories, right? All of the, and so you can see evidence of these other smaller conspiracy theories in the episode being talked about. And really all the episode is trying to do is say, okay, but how does aliens explain that? Right. And so this like sort of, sun inside the earth thing reminded me a lot of conspiracy theories about flat earth. And it was like, okay, how do we make that an alien thing? Right. We can kind of sneak it in here with this reference to life under, inside the earth or whatever. Maybe that's alien.
Yeah.
So that seems to be such a theme of the show is wanting to be the center around all the conspiracy theories in the world rotate. It's all aliens, and it's positioned. They've positioned themselves that way very successfully. I think a lot of people have accepted that, and it's probably a lot of the reason for the success of the show, the cultural icon status of this show, in some ways.
Yeah, I think I can agree with that too. But I think there's where they are leaving us wanting more.
Always. You gotta leave on a cliffhanger. Well, this episode was, all over the place. I don't know what the cliffhanger is because this whole last section felt very tacked on. I don't know.
I think the writers come up with the different themes and then they're trying to fill the episode however they might be able to do it. Sometimes they just throw things into, we have 5 minutes and we need something extra somewhere. And they just put in...
the theme was just the word underground, right? And so it was all these things had things to do. But the other ones all had kind of cultural, archaeological elements. And this one very much is a more... Maybe that's why I felt very out of place. This was more like a pseudo-geology story instead of a pseudo-archaeology story. Maybe that's why I felt out of place.
All right, but if how would you rate the episode, knowledge-wise?
Oh, I mean, it's pretty bad. I mean, it's real bad. I mean, there are a couple of times throughout the episode where they are almost honest about things, right? And they're like they present information. You know, the sites they talk about are real places. They're real archaeological sites, and some of the things they describe about those sites are true. But in some ways that's like, I don't know how to say if it's worse, but it's maybe just as bad as just making something up from whole cloth, because you're actually using real information to mislead, right? To say something. I don't know if I planned when I went to come on the show and be this quite so. I mean, people are going to yell on me on Twitter. That's okay. It won't be the first time. That's actually in some ways as bad or worse. It's really misusing real information. And as we've said many times, the real tragedy of it, the real wrong here is the way that it robs people of their own histories, their own heritage, their own cultural value, and just like replaces it with this alien stuff. And they seem to intentionally target people who they know are not going to fight back, because they're not going to be watching this dumb show, right? It's very seems very intentional in that way, right? I don't know. I wonder if So in terms of rating, like I said, it's the first episode I've ever watched, so it's both the best and worst episode of Ancient Aliens you've ever seen. and I plan to keep it that way. I'll listen to the show. I'm going to get your descriptions of the episodes. That's how I'll learn about Ancient Aliens episodes. You're going to do the pain for me, you and your future guests. But it was really interesting to watch. I won't say it was pleasant to watch. It actually was quite painful to watch, but it was interesting to watch. And like I said, I took like a bunch of notes because there's a lot in there. There's the whole, in some ways, this show is like a little Rosetta Stone, to use an archaeology example, like a Rosetta Stone for like the broader world of conspiracy theories. Not necessarily just this episode. I think the whole show. It's all in there. The classic claims, the techniques, the ways that they mislead, the way that they misuse data, the way that they manipulate their guests to say things that they're not really trying to say. So much of that stuff is right there in this episode, and I think probably in most of the episodes. So
yeah, if you're following the conspiracy or misinformation people somewhat, you will see these strategies and how they do it in the anti-vax movement, in the Q movement, in the and Ancient Aliens, they have become the forebearers, who you would go to learn how to use these technologies. So I think it's a great show to base on.
It is. It's a really great show to analyze from that angle. It's important to understand, and like we've kind of suggested, there are researchers out there who are studying this stuff because it's important. Because these even the conspiracy theory stuff in these shows that seem harmless on their face, you scratch below the surface and you very quickly find they're connected to some very scary stuff a lot of times, or they're being used as a cover for very scary stuff. They're being used for cover for some of the worst actors out there, who are not your friend. They're not trying to do nice things in the world. So it's important to analyze. I think we're having fun, and hopefully people will watch this and get some laughs, because I think we told some good jokes. But that this is also definitely connected to some very serious, heavy stuff. And understanding it's important. So, and you mentioned before, I think you said something really smart before. You talked about this stuff being like the religious. Last thing I'll say, the religious text. I think in some ways that's true. Like Ancient Aliens is a religious text of the pseudo archaeology community in many ways. So it's important for that reason.
Yeah, I think so too. And with Van Daniken, he is maybe the pseudo archaeologist pope in a sense.
Yeah. He's the whatever, the gospel writer, his books
Luke,
are
the Paul,
his books are foundational in many ways. Dare I say it's seminal? That's a word.
All right, Bill. If people want to hear and see more of you, where should they go?
Well, you can find me on Twitter at archeologygame, or you can find me on my YouTube channel is youtube.com/c/videogame archaeology, all one word. Or if you Google my name, you can find my more professional credentials out there. And look me up on ResearchGate or academia.edu or whatever if you want to read some of my papers that have nothing to do with any of this. Totally separate stuff. But I do find this stuff really fascinating, and it was really interesting to get a chance to talk about it. So that's how you can find me.
Yeah, and thank you for your time, and links to your shows and Twitter will be in the description to this episode if you want to hear some more from Bill. But again, a big thanks to you, Bill. Thank you for your time.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. This was actually, it was really fun and such an interesting conversation. So thank you for having me.
Again, thank you to Bill Farley. And if you want to check out his stuff, it will be linked in the show notes, and of course you can find it on the website too. And I have to bring up something before you send me one of those nasty emails. I say that a Playboy interview with Van Daniken was in the 80s. No, it was a brain freeze on my end. It was 1973, and it was done with a skeptic called Timothy Ferris. Enough of that. Remember to leave a positive review anywhere you can, such as iTunes, Spotify, or maybe recommend the show to your friend in the trench. I would also recommend you to visit diggingupancientaliens.com, where you find some more info about me and the podcast, and of course there you can find all my social media accounts. And if you have comments, suggestions, or you want to write an all caps email, my contact info is on the website. Until next time, keep shoveling that science. Thank you for tuning in and listening to this episode. Remember that we have a subscription going on. You can become a patron or other subscriber for as little as $2.50 per episode. Go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support. That is, go to diggingupancientaliens.com/support to read more information and sign up right there.